Okay, for step 3, we now have our main focal point. We've got some depth built up in the tree to the left. To the right is my farther back trees. And we're going to start developing this little land area that I had in my original design. So I just took and I added in a little bit of black, you may have noticed, to show some of the shading on the trees themselves. And I added in a little bit of a reflection down to the bottom. So I'm going to set my brush aside. Again, as things move closer to the viewer, they tend to get bigger and they have more contrast built into it. Here I want to add in a small little area. So again, I have my foreground, my middle ground, my foreground, my middle ground, and my background, those light little area patches off to the back there. Normally you're going to let your trees fully dry. I'm going to go ahead and keep going on with this painting. So I'm going to go down to the base of the tree because right now the trees are just floating right above the water. And I want to give it the land that it's starting to grow out of. So the trunks are kind of drying, but I don't want this to over blend. So I've given it just about 5 minutes in between there. And I'm going to go back to my pink. You can see my palette gets pretty messy, like I said, and I'm not too worried about this. It's just the Impressionist painting here. So I'm going to dab some of that light kind of pink off that I was using last. And I'm going to start bringing more of this hot pink. Try to find an open spot on your palette or your paper plate. I don't have a ton of pigment on this, and I'm using that same old scrubbly brush that I had, so they go all different directions here. And I'm going to actually start building up the mound that it's sort of sitting on, and I imagine it to have a little bit of leaves that fell onto the ground itself. I'm just going to bring up and around. I'm not overworking onto the trees. Here I feel like I've got a little too much on it, so I'm just dabbing some of the extras off and bringing it over to my page or to my canvas. And just darkening down here. I'm grabbing some more dark edge to it. So again, I have that variation of colors, and you'll see that I'm kind of covering up where the two reflected. This is going to turn into a landmass. Something like that looks pretty good. Now I'm going to go ahead and bring my brown. So the paint is still wet, and I'm just bringing the brown into it. Something like that. Again, just creating that base that it's growing out of. So I don't want to cover up the trunks of my trees, and if I go too heavy with something, I can grab my brown brush and bring that right back. I'm just working the two colors together. Now, some people would ask, like, why wouldn't you have any green showing in the ground? Well, because I don't have any green in the rest of my painting, I'm steering clear and just building it up with some browns and blacks and into that hot pink. So everything stays nice and cohesive looking. This lighter color I could bring to the top side. Again, just using what I already have mixed up. And this is just that reflection. I'll fill this in a little more. Something like that. So it's reflecting what is naturally happening into the rest of the painting or into the sky. And here I could start adding in some more of my fine details. So I'm just cleaning off my small brush here. Making sure I don't have any brown left on it. Now at this point, I can start adding in the white highlights that really separate this area from being the reflection area. For me, I just want to go ahead and pop in a little bit more pink foliage going on in the back because it would reflect into the water itself. I'm just going to go in and add just a little more. And again, if there's any too dark spots, you can just take your light right over the top of that. Now I'm grabbing my small brush and I'm dipping right into my titanium white. I don't have a whole lot loaded up on here. And now I'm going to go in and just hit some white highlights right along the back where the water would kind of be lapping right against the shore. And if it's not moving as easily as you'd like it to, I just dipped into some water. And I'm just outlining or contouring, you know, where the water is lapping up against the shore. And what that does is it tells the viewer this is the land area, and then down here is just reflecting into the water. So I don't want it too perfect. I'm just giving little hints there. And this is a land area that I developed up front. So I'm going to go in with my whites. Again, that's just where it's lapping or hitting the shoreline. I'm going to grab some more water. I did not add any more paint to this. I just dipped it into the water. And here I'm going to kind of add in a few watery lines right up to the top, right over my reflection area. Now, don't be afraid to get that reflection in there. That tells the rest of the story. And I might add in a few little more. And I do like to let the paint run out on my brush so I get more subtle brush strokes. And if you feel like it's just too much on the brush, you can just dab it right off to the side and then bring it over to your painting. Some of these areas got a little dark on me, so I'm just taking a dry brush and I'm going right over the top, just softening, really, the lines I just made with the white. And I'm just blending that together. Nothing on my brush, just some water. It just softens some of my brush strokes. So back here, it got a little too white. So again, just going in and softening that edge, sweeping back and forth with my brush. Now down here, I feel like I should add in, you know, some white, and just to break that up. I could also be using my square brush, which I already have covered with some paint. So, I mean, if I wanted to, I could go in. Again, nothing on my brush. It's just smoothing out some of those white strokes here. I do not want to add any white highlight to any of the parts that are growing naturally, not reflecting in the water. I think I'm going to bring some more of that white kind of down here. Dipped into the water. Anything that's reflecting in the water is fair game to add in a bit of a white highlight to it. So that is the basics of adding in your highlights. Again, I use just a small little round brush, but you could also use, if I cleaned this up nicely, I could definitely use the square-headed brush too. My point in for this is just to get movement going on in the water and then clearly showing the viewer this is a reflection and this is what is happening in real life. There's a few little areas I would definitely continue working on. I might go in here and just soften the edge of some of these trunks, or I could bring in some more blue if I wanted some of that sky shining through, but I would probably continue working on this for at least another half hour. But just so, for the purposes of demos itself, so you can kind of see what we end up with, just an abstract cherry tree design. And then in a couple little areas you can, rework. There's always something to kind of take another look at and see. I do like to leave my paintings just set overnight and come back to it with a fresh pair of eyes. But this would be a completed Impressionist cherry drawing with the painting with the reflection happening in the river below. Here I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.